What's good people, and welcome back to another tutorial on the channel. We're doing tutorials every single Thursday on the No Agony channel, so yeah, stay tuned every Thursday, man. So in today's video I'm going to be showing you guys how to get that UK drill bounce, that Russ Lowski UK drill bounce. Before we get into it, I'm going to show you exactly what we're working with, so I'm going to play the beat so you guys can listen to it and get a feel for it.
Sound clear.
So yeah guys, that's what we're working with. First off, one of the most important aspects of when you're making a drill beat, especially a UK drill beat, is you want to get a good melody. If you don't have a good melody, it's not going to be good, obviously. So for this beat, first of all, I found a vocal sample by LJS, and you just want to find something super simple and catchy. Usually the 4-bar phrase vocal samples are just the best. This is what this one sounds like. And I just added some basic like ethnic stuff from Contact. Now if you're going to be making your own melodies or adding stuff to these samples, remember when you're making stuff, I know this isn't a melody tutorial, but still, you want to use triplets a lot, because triplets in the melody, it accentuates the bounce tenfold, I swear to God. So you want to use triplets when you're making melodies or you're like fleshing out the sample. So yeah, that's the first thing. Second thing is the hi-hats. Hi-hats and the kick, in my opinion, are the most important things in a drill beat, especially UK drill, that give it the bounce. Without them, you can't tell if it's a drill beat or not. So with the hi-hats, what I've done here is not the usual old school drill hi-hat pattern. It's not the typical one. So to create a lot of bounce in the beat, you want to have empty spaces, you want to have low velocities, you want to have panning. So if you go to pan here, I don't think I panned any, but yeah, sometimes I will pan like from left to right like this. It just creates a new bounce like Agony, but I haven't done it in this beat. But yeah, like I said, you want to keep empty spaces because that's just the simplest and best way to create bounce. So I'm going to play the hi-hat pattern for you just on its own. Now, one thing you want to remember when you're making bounce in these beats is the 8th bar of every 8-bar phrase is always going to be complicated, because that's like it's like a build up before the next 8-bar phrase. So it's not too complicated here, because I like to keep it relatively simple so artists can still jump on it. But I've just added some low notes, some higher but still low notes, played with velocities here. So it's a little bit more complex, but overall it's quite simple. I haven't done many rolls, and you just play with the velocity, and the key is just to keep it very simple and have spaces, because then when the hi-hats come back in, you feel it more. It's more vibey, it's more bouncy. Now the next thing is the snare. First I layered the new wave ghosty type snare, and then the sort of old school drill snare. I've got a short one and then I've got a long one. Again, it's just ear candy, it's not really important, but the most important thing with a snare is the way I've done the snare. It doesn't always hit, which is important in this context, because for example, you can see here and here you've got empty space, and again, like I said, when you don't play something and then it comes in later, it just hits harder. It hits harder, it's more bouncy. So as you can see here again, the snare just gets a bit more complicated, but here, because the snare isn't playing, it just draws attention to the hi-hat pattern with the special thing. It's like a special roll, it's not really special, but so once you've got that done, you want to move on to the perks. Some people go super crazy. I don't like to go super crazy because we're not doing beat battles, we're doing this for artists, we're doing this for placements. So first of all, I've got a open hat. Just super simple, decreasing in velocity, and also the panning, I've just done some ear candy. But the most bouncy way to use your open hats is this pattern, and usually it's going to be at the end of the 4th bar or the 8th bar or both, or on the 2nd bar. You just got to play around with it, but that is like what a lot of people do at the minute. The next one's a triangle. again at the end of the 4th bar or the 8th bar. Super simple, it just like builds up. The next one is just, I don't even know why I added this, it's just like super minimal. It's just like, it sounds like a reverse hi-hat, that's why I added it. It's just super simple, and it only plays twice. And these last 2 ones are literally mainly for building up the bounce. This one's a gunshot, it's in every drill beat, but this is really important because in 99% of drill beats, at the end of the 8th bar, you have something like this. So when you come to the end of the bar, it just builds up even more. So yeah, in terms of bounce, drum wise, apart from the kick, we've gone through most of the ways that you can create a super unique bouncing drill, and it just helps your beat stand out compared to the typical, you know, drill beats. There's so many producers who are trying drill right now, and as a person from the UK, it's sad to see everyone doing the same thing. Next thing, the kick. Again, this is really simple. It's like the simplest kick pattern for drill, apart from the end where you just play around with the velocities and just put like notes where you don't expect them to be. Normally people would keep them to the grid, so like every half step or step, but if you do this, it just creates like a more bouncy feel. So you want to usually, when you go to the magnet, go to half step or third step being triplets. Like I mentioned again before, triplets are like what make drill so bouncy, and then just play around with your kicks, but definitely make use of the velocity because it just takes your beat to a whole nother level. So I'll play the kick with the rest of the drums so you can hear what it's sounding like. It's super simple. And as you can hear, again, it just builds up. Now the last part of the drums is the 808. You want to keep it fairly simple. I think we're in C sharp minor here, so as you can see, the C sharp, the note of C sharp is really carrying throughout the whole 808 pattern. Now when you're making 808s for UK drill, especially Russ and Lowski, you want to keep the 808s at 2 or 3 notes. So you want to have 2 or 3 notes in the 808 pattern that are regularly being played, and then you don't want to have too many more notes outside of those notes, so that it just keeps it super consistent. Now so that it doesn't get boring, you're obviously going to have multiple 808 patterns. I recommend 2. I think more than 2 is too complicated, and in the second 808 pattern you can always just like switch it up. You can have 3 different notes that are playing consistently. So I'll show you the first 808 pattern. So here we have C sharp and C sharp and A. They're the 3 main notes that keep appearing for the whole 808 pattern, and these notes below are just used for sliding. Now this is another secret sauce. It's not really secret, but it's sauce that gets your 808s bouncy. So typically on your first note you would have just a normal root note here, but what you need to start doing, this is what makes it more bouncy, is slide up to that note. So I'll show you what I mean right now. For example, here you can usually do 5 or 6 notes below the root note. You're going to place a note and you can slide up to the root note, so it sounds like this. It's super subtle, but when you play it in the context of the whole beat, it sounds completely different and it leads into the next bar. I'd recommend doing this at the end of the 4th bar or the 8th bar, because then it leads into the next bar much nicer than if it was just this. I'll play you an example now. So this is without the slide, which sounds alright, and that sounds a bit weird, but in the context of having drums, it'll sound like this. Now for the second 808 pattern, I've made use of these slides even more heftier, and as you can see here, this slides way before the first bar of the second half of the 8-bar phrase. And again, it leads into it way more nicely compared to just having a standard root note there. So I'll show you what I mean. And if you compare that to just having this, it just sounds way cleaner and smoother. So yeah, when it comes to 808 patterns, like I said, keep it simple. 3 main notes, usually the root note, the 5th note, so the 5th of the scale, and another note. It depends, but that's my rule of thumb for creating simple 808s. I feel like when you go overboard, it ruins the bounce because it draws your attention too much to the 808s and you just ignore all of the other drums. And the final thing I want to say with 808s, please use short slides. Don't use long slides. It's not good. When you're sliding up to high notes and it's really long, it's just not nice. Alright, so now we've done the drums. The next thing that I'll add bounce is you want to have switch ups in the beat. Simple, small stuff that switch it up, because you've been used to listening to one sound or one particular type of sound for a whole while, and then it switches up to something else. It regenerates that bounce. It makes it a new bounce. So here I've got kickstart on the vocal, and I just bring it in here. So here we're playing the vocal just normal, and later on it just switches up with kickstart. Again, like I said, really subtle, but it makes a difference. Another thing is a simple EQ sweep. It switches up the bounce of the beat, switches up the feel of the beat. It's as simple as getting an EQ on the master and controlling the bands. So I'll show you what I mean. It serves as a nice transition as well, so I'll show you guys how I did that. Literally get an EQ, and then you want to just mess around with this band, go to add, and then press automation for last tweak parameter, and then you basically get this and you can automate the EQ. With this tool, it's really useful. This is just like a bonus tip. You can literally automate anything in FL. If you don't have this add, just right click here, press edit, and then you can just drag it and add up here. Another thing you want to be using is a lot of rises every 4 bars. So what I usually do, rule of thumb, is a big noticeable riser every 8 bars and then smaller rises every 4 bars. So the smaller rises just lead in and again renew the bound, and the big rises is just like to tell you, okay, this is a new section, this is a new part of the beat. So I'll show you what I mean now. So this is the big riser and these are the small risers. Again, the big riser, it just shows you it's a new part of the beat or it's the second half of the hook. Okay, so this next tip isn't really sort of bounce related, but it helps your beat hit harder, which kind of makes it more bouncy, because if the kick is really hitting, then it makes the beat more bouncy, especially if you got your kick pattern nailed. So this is what you want to do. This is how I sidechain. I just use Pretty Peak controller. You want to make sure the bass is on 50% and the decay is your choice. If you want an 808 that comes in slower, you can mess around with that, but basically what you want to do, get an EQ, drag it wherever you want the 808 to sidechain, and then right click here, link to controller. I've already done this, but peak control, and then make sure it's inverted, press accept. I'm not going to do that because I've already done it, and it will basically sidechain your stuff, and it will basically sidechain your kick and 808. You can play around with this if you only want the bass frequencies to be sidechained. Personally, I just like it with the most of the 808 is EQ'd out. So that just makes your kick hit even harder, because none of the 808 frequencies, they're not interfering with the kick. So it just makes it like hit harder. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's as simple as that. The only other thing I would mention is structuring your beat. You want to have small break. Again, like I said, it's like psychology. You want to give the listener or the artist a little break so that their ears are like readjusting, and then you bring everything in again slowly, and it just renews this bounce, because they're hearing something different even though they're hearing the same thing. For example, they've been hearing this melody the whole time, but now that the melody is playing on its own, it feels completely different. And then you can play around with pitching the melody up and down like I've done here. Again, the way bounce work is it's psychology, it's vibe based, it's what you're feeling, you know, and you gotta make the artist feel like the beat isn't the same thing the whole way through. So these little ear candy stuff and these little transitions, it just makes the beat way more bouncier. That's literally how you make a UK drill beat bouncy style. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll drop my @ in the description, the comments, I don't know, @SamCliffBeats. And yeah, stay tuned every Thursday. New tutorial on No Agony. Peace.